We were waiting for an additional board member to arrive, and I think we've given him enough leeway. Well, hopefully he'll join us shortly. But I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting of the September 14th meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll?
Douglas Gasek.
Here.
James Doherty.
Here.
Paul Hill.
Here.
Andrew Garcia. Jeff Dinwiddie.
Here.
Thomas Tiber.
Here.
Steve Pratt.
Here.
Lori Abel.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. First item of business is the minutes from Wednesday, July 13th, 2011. May I have a motion? Mr. Gasek, second. Can someone second, please? Mr. Doherty, thank you. Are there any additions or changes to the minutes? Are there any objection to approval of the minutes? Seeing none, those are approved. Our next item, special order of business, executive sessions, is disclosures. Does anyone have any disclosures tonight? Are there any disclosures? Seeing none, we have no disclosures for tonight. That's great. Our next item of business under special order of business, an informational item, case 2011-036, South Anchorage High School landscape buffer screening improvements. That was provided by the Anchorage School District, and I believe will be scheduled for a hearing. Is that correct? And that'll be in October? Okay. I do note that there's representatives of the school district here. Is there any questions of the school district, or do you have anything to add at this point on this item? No. Okay. Are there any questions from the board on this informational item to the school district?
I've got one.
Mr. Pratt.
Yeah, I have one question. Thanks. Thank you for the memo of September 1st that kind of described the actions that you're taking. And maybe this is more appropriate for the October meeting, but I noticed that they have begun installing trees in the buffer area. And in some of the other areas, one of the requirements is that the trees are nursery grown, and I'm wondering if these comply with that standard or if this is different. And I don't know if you want to handle that here or later.
I guess you could just note that as a concern. Is there someone from the school district who would like to address that at this point, or just have that information available for the next meeting? Mr. Schoenthal?
My name is Terry Schoenthal, and tonight I represent the Anchorage School District. And with response to your question with regard to the trees, the bulk of them actually are nursery grown. They come from the nursery in the valley, Seed and Tree. Some of them are actually native collected, and we provided in the specifications for this one that they could be native collected because they are white spruce. It is not the intent with these trees that they be highly ornamental or perfectly formed, because in fact they're really forming a screening area within an existing buffer. And so we're augmenting a natural area of vegetation. The intent is that since the time that South High was constructed, the natural buffer that's there has been exposed to high winds, when before that time it was all enclosed within a large wooded area. So it's not unusual for trees under those circumstances to blow down. And what we're looking to do is to replace them with a wide variety of sizes, from virtual seedlings up through pretty large trees, as a means of stabilizing that buffer. So the intent here is that while the requirement for nursery grown trees is often related to ornamental appearance of these trees in a municipal landscape, it's not such an important factor in this, and it was our feeling that we'd get a better price for purchase of those trees if we didn't emphasize that aspect of it, when that wasn't really the driving criteria.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the school district on this informational item? Mr. Dinwiddie.
I guess part of what I thought we were trying to accomplish was not only a visual buffer, but a noise buffer as well. That was what the public hearing was all about. And I actually, for full disclosure, we bid on the project. We were dead last. But we also, in the specification, it did say that and I think this is a quote, it could be field quality number 2 white spruce, which basically, and I think the exact description of the trees was you didn't expect a perfect form. I guess my concern, and I voiced this that night, is that you're going to get done with this project, and you're going to be able to see right through those white spruce, and it's going to take 5 to 10 years for that to grow in, and we're going to be right back where we were with the 500 people that testified here, and we're pretty clear about that as to, this is a simple fix for the school district to make the neighborhood, be happy, and I think that you're going to be right back here with with the bid that you got and the results you got, and the trees, the first few trees that are out there, they're all field collected. They're number 2 field quality trees so far, and I guess I would reiterate that we're going to be right back here, and we're going to have a horde of testimony from particularly homeowners that are backed right up to that green belt, and we have accomplished nothing but spending $50,000 of the school district's money.
Well, the trees were only delivered this afternoon, so it's hard to imagine how someone would already know they were number 2s. In fact, they look quite good. And they're just on site now. They're probably going to start installing as early as tomorrow. But the fact is we're putting in a large number of the trees. We're trying to use trees that are as hardy and native as we can, that aren't going to require a huge amount of maintenance. And I think that there's perhaps differences of opinion on the benefits of different trees. I respect your opinion on it, but I do believe that the white spruce will be ultimately effective.
So these trees have been provided or delivered to the site?
A portion of the trees, about a third of them were delivered this afternoon. Previously, we did install over 100 saplings that were provided by the Department of Natural Resources.
Could you provide pictures of those trees that have been delivered in time for the next meeting?
I believe that wouldn't be a problem at all.
Great. Any other questions for the school district at this time on this informational item? Apparently not. Thank you. That brings us to our next item on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. We have resolution for approval 2011-004 and 2011-037 for approval. It's a context-sensitive solution transportation project site plan and landscape plan review for 32nd Avenue upgrade. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda? Mr. Doherty. Mr. Gasek seconds. Are there any changes or additions to the resolutions on the consent agenda? Okay. Is there any objections to the consent agenda? Seeing none, that is approved. That brings us to item E, unfinished business and actions for public hearing. We have 2 resolutions that were previously pulled from our consent agenda for questions. They're resolutions 2011-005 and for a public hearing site plan review for Park Master Plan for Far North Bicentennial Park Trail improvements, and resolution 2011-006, an amendment to a public facility site plan review for South Anchorage High School, Turning and View Estates, located at 13400 Elmore Street. I think I want to treat these similar to a consent agenda item and ask for a motion for approval for both resolutions, please. It's been moved by Mr. Doherty, seconded by Mr. Tybor. Does any of the commissioners wish to pull either one of these resolutions for additional discussion or modification? Apparently not. Is there objection to either one of these resolutions for approval under item E? Seeing none, those items are approved. That gets us to our regular agenda, site and landscape plan approval. Our first case is 2011-097. The petitioner is AWWU. It's a request for a landscape plan review for a public facility. The total area of the site is 170 acres. It's a review of the Girdwood Wastewater Treatment Plant Facility, located generally east of Alyeska Road and south of Urain Road. This is not a public hearing. And staff, can we have a presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I've never presented before the Urban Design Commission, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Margaret O'Brien. I work in the Planning Division. And as mentioned, this is a landscape plan review for a public utility. And there was a conditional use review by the Planning and Zoning Commission that was held on July 11th, this year. A copy of the staff report for that, the resolution is included at the back of the packet. And basically, this property, the facility has been located within Lot 71 since 1978, and it is being expanded, and the treatment methodology is being upgraded to a more effective manner in treating wastewater products. And the proposal is to expand and upgrade that. The proposed upgrade will consist of, it's being done in 2 phases, and the first phase is the influent pump station, the electrical and operations buildings. In phase 2, treatment and residual buildings will be constructed. Phase 1, the time frame is to begin in next year and be complete with spring of 2013. Phase 2 could start in 2013, depending on the availability of funding, but it is anticipated that it will begin at least by 2016, and it would have a 2-year time frame beyond 2016 if that is when it's actually begun. As noted, this is south of Urain Road, and it is zoned GIP in Girdwood, the Girdwood Institutions and Park District. The Heritage Land Bank does own Lot 71. It does contain 172 acres. It has not been subdivided, so there is no platting boundaries between any of the uses within this parcel. The solid waste disposal is located to the west of the AWWU site, and it is zoned Urain Road Industrial, and the public utility for AWWU is a permitted use in the Girdwood Institutions and Parks District. The majority of the 172 acres is zoned Girdwood open space. It is heavily forested, and this is far removed. It is remote from residential development. So the impact on residential neighborhoods will be very minimal with the upgrade of the AWWU utility. The landscaping is intended to be hardy, to be low maintenance, because it's intended that it should survive in the event that there is low maintenance, and to ensure the survivability within what is really a rather wet area. The California Creek flows to the west of the site. Glacier Creek flows to the east of the site, and it does merge with Virgin Creek at one point. And the Iditarod Trail proposed alignment runs along Glacier Creek to the west, but there is heavy forestation that will separate the AWW use from recreational users who would be using and walking along Glacier Creek. The Planning and Zoning Commission did find that the building style is consistent with the Girdwood climate, mountain setting, and small western mining town character, which is a goal of the Girdwood area plan. The size and scale is in keeping with the Girdwood regs regulations at 2109. They did have to obtain a variance for the scale of the treatment facility, but that was dictated by the actual equipment that will be located in that building, and it did require a building size that size. The exterior structure will consist of materials that are muted in color to blend in with the surrounding forest, and the landscaping will enhance the planned architectural details for the planned upgrade. Other than that, for public access basically is for people who are delivering materials to the solid waste, and sometimes there are school visits to the site, and the plantings that are proposed will break up the visibility of the buildings and will provide a pleasant entry for those tours of the facility. There were no agency comments submitted for this case. However, the Girdwood Board of Supervisors did pass a resolution in support of the upgrade of the AWW facility. However, there were not any written comments specific to the landscaping that is proposed for the site. The department does recommend approval, subject to the condition on page 3. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Is there any questions of staff? Is there any questions of staff? Apparently not. Will the petitioner please come forward and make a brief presentation?
Good evening. My name is Chris Beck. I'm a consultant working on behalf of the Water Wastewater Utility. We have been giving a presentation in many different contexts, and it's maybe more force than is needed here. I have about 12 slides, and if it seems reasonable, I'll go through those specifically. Ms. O'Brien has done a very good job of giving an overview of the project. Maybe I'll just add a few visuals to go with those, and then we can talk a little bit more about the site plan if that's helpful. And I apologize starting off, Mr. Gassick. We tried to arrange this so people could see both in the audience and up front. Okay. So I will do this very quickly, and if you see things that catch your attention, raise a hand or catch me at the end. So as is shown, it's a wastewater treatment facility upgrade. Location was described. It's there off Ruin Road. It's at the existing wastewater treatment facility. Reasons for this may be less directly of concern of this group, but the facility was designed some years ago. It's really reached the end of its service life, and of particular concern, it doesn't have the capacity to meet the flows that are coming with a growing community, and in particular, some of the heavier runoff that comes during storm events. And so this is a necessary response to that demand. I'm going quick, so
that's
slow down if you ask me to. As mentioned, it's within an area designated by the area plan as an industrial site. And while that's the case, a lot of care has gone into designing buildings that will make them, I think, distinctive among utility structures. We'll show a few of those in a moment. As mentioned, it's coming in as a phased project. The lighter blue color showed the initial phases, and then later the actual treatment facility goes in. Community spent a lot of time chewing on this, and I think really in the end was solidly in favor of the project. I think they recognize that an expanded facility is in their interest. Some changes were made to meet some aesthetic issues, but as mentioned earlier, twice this went through the Land Use Committee, the Trail Committee, and the Board of Supervisors, and each time was given a vote of non-resolution is how they expressed support. And some of the changes that came up at the end were some revisions to the building footprint to just keep it down to the minimum footprint possible, some refinements in the site design and the building design to make it better fit with the Girdwood environment, and some subtle changes with the Iditarod Trail to meet the concerns of the Trail Committee and some of the recreation users in the committee. With that, I'll pass it to Richard, who will talk a little bit about the building.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Richard Rurick. I'm with UMIAC, and we're the architects, and I'm the architect of record for the project. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I'm here to answer questions. I did want to show this slide just to represent the process-related nature of these buildings, and the fact that these deep basins and the linear process function caused us to have quite a couple large buildings. One's 200 feet, and the other's, I believe it's about 140 feet by about 70 feet wide. So that really dictated a lot of what happens on this site in conjunction with the existing facility that's there and leaving it remaining functional for the time period that the rest of the facility is constructed. This right here, again, is one of the treatment buildings. We did take to heart the Girdwood land use regulations, and we worked with the community of Girdwood to try to come up with imagery on the buildings that didn't look like a big treatment processing center. So what we're doing is we're using earth tones and using some stone on the bottom. We're going to have probably the siding would be like a hardy plank. We may end up going to a painted steel on that, but probably some sort of hardy plank. And we broke up the roof lines on the buildings, even the large buildings, so that the people that live up above won't just see this big mass, and also from down at ground level it breaks up the massing as well. So even though we have a couple very large buildings, we feel like it creates a little bit of a cottage look, or a more of an alpine style.
We may rent rooms for the need for the wastewater treatment is reduced.
This site here is kind of just looking from up above down on the site, and then these are the full collection of buildings that we have out on the site, with the exception of the influent pump station. And then I think with that, okay, I'll let Stephanie go ahead and just talk about the landscaping features on this site. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Brown from Earthscape. We're the landscape architects on this project. The primary goal of the landscaping for this wastewater treatment is to screen the facility for other users on site while maintaining the natural character of the site. The main vegetation screen, you can see it on the north above the existing building. This bed also helps to direct visitors into the operations building, as we heard before. In tying the new landscaping to the existing, native trees and shrub species will be used in a naturalistic way. And back to Chris.
So that, as requested, was the brief overview. There are a couple more pictures of buildings, but I think you've got the essence of the proposal. We'd be happy to answer questions if you have any.
Great. Are there any questions of the applicant? Mr. Gasek.
Yeah, I have a question about the facility as it relates to the Iditarod Trail. I was just wondering what the existing vegetation is kind of south of where the influent pump station is going to be, like, to provide a sufficient buffer, if it provides a sufficient buffer for the Iditarod.
The Trail Committee in the community is active and shares probably the concerns behind your question, and so we talked with them quite a bit about the location and how it might be influenced. There's not a lot of space between the edge of the facility and Glacier Creek as it runs by, but in the end they were satisfied that the route through this location was adequate to maintain the function of the trail and to minimize the impact. I think maybe a fair example is the existing Asplund plant in the coastal trail here in town, where you're not unaware of the presence of the trail, but I think every effort will be made to minimize its visual presence through the planting, the retention of existing vegetation. So that's a general answer, but they were satisfied that every effort was being made to do that.
Okay, so there's going to be a continuing effort to create a better vegetative buffer in there, because it looks like it's pretty minimal right now.
It's fairly thin right now, you're correct. I mean, it gets down into some of the riparian vegetation. It's not as dense a forest as would be ideal as a starting point. So there's some new planting, there's some contours that will be placed in the pad the buildings sit on, and the trail will be taken as far to the side as possible. But ultimately it follows along some older berms that were built as part of an earlier effort. And so people passing by will be aware that they're going by this important facility.
Definitely. Great, thanks.
As a follow-up to that question, there's a fence indicated on the plan in between the proposed influent pump station and the Iditarod Trail. Can you describe that fence for us?
Rarely do I feel stumped. I'm not sure if I have an answer on that.
Is it chain link? Is it wood? Will it provide any screening or buffering from the Iditarod Trail to this facility?
I think that it probably needs to be, but I can't deliver the answer that's already been thought through.
There's someone on the team that has an answer? What kind of fence
I don't
you
know.
put?
We haven't discussed it a lot. From my recollection, we were talking about...
Could you come forward and be heard for the record?
From my recollection, when we had discussed it in some of our project meetings, we're talking about chain link, and I don't know if a lot of consideration, discussion about that side of the site has been given with respect to the fence.
Okay, thank you.
I think the logic is that it will be largely screened by vegetation between the trail and the fence. So I'm not sure if that's sufficient, but I think that's the intent.
It's my experience that when a fence is installed, additional vegetation is removed.
Yeah.
And that would be my concern. And if it's already a little thin, maybe something else could be incorporated to assist in that screening, was my thought. Any reaction to any of those thoughts?
I think it seems like a reasonable request that the users of the trail don't find themselves passing immediately adjoining a quite visible and not very attractive fence. I'm not sure that it would be necessary to deal with the fence until looking more closely at what the vegetation situation would be. So if I was going to be so bold as to suggest a way to address it, it would be to have a suggestion perhaps from this group that either there be sufficient vegetative screening or, if necessary, actions taken to make the fence a reasonable neighbor to a well-used trail. And it may be that latter option wouldn't be necessary depending on how the vegetation actually works out. But to set the standard for certain visual quality there.
Okay, thank you. Are there additional questions of the applicant? Evidently not. Thank you. Well, this is not a public hearing, so there's not additional testimony, so the matter rests with the board. May I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Gasek?
I'll move to approve UDC case number 2011-97 landscape plan review for AWW Girdwood wastewater treatment facility upgrade with an additional recommendation that reads provide sufficient vegetative screening between Iditarod Trail and the facility.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gasek, I was not writing very quickly. Can you repeat that?
Provide sufficient vegetative screening between Iditarod Trail and the facility.
And who would you suggest that they're going to resolve that with? Would that be resolved with staff?
With staff.
Okay. And were you also going to reference the additional conditions of staff on page 3?
Yeah, including the staff recommendations, 1A and B.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gasek. Can we have a second, please? Mr. Doherty, thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr. Gasek?
Yeah, I think overall the landscape plan that was submitted was really great. It definitely contributes to the different uses on the site. It tries to take in consideration the Iditarod Trail and the neighboring properties and adequately screening from the road, which is great to see. And the architecture really fits in with the community as a whole, which was also good to see.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Doherty, do you have any additional comments to add?
Yeah, I would just add on that my support for this type of architecture. I know there are some visual guidelines and design standards for Girdwood, which are contributing to this, but I don't believe I've seen industrial buildings that are as well thought out, and I commend the petitioner for that.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Any other comments from the board? Apparently not. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you.
Get the camels back on the trailers.
I was impressed by your stand. It's a nice adaptation.
Yes, one burn twice, a couple times had the system not working.
Yeah.
Passing around a zip drive. Remember that?
Yeah, our wonderful technology. Thank you, Mr. Beck. Our next case is 2011-098, the petitioner of Alaska Botanical Gardens. The request is for a site plan and landscape plan review for Alaska Botanical Garden. The area is 81 acres. It is located generally east of Campbell Airstrip Road and south of Tudor Road. Again, this is not a public hearing. Staff, may we have a presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, this is a concept site and concept landscape plan for proposed development within the garden. It is also a request for final approval of the Botanical Gardens master plan. And as you mentioned, you've mentioned the location. And the property is zoned public lands and institution. The Alaska Botanical Garden is a private nonprofit organization. It's operated by a board of directors. The mission of this organization is to provide a public garden dedicated to enhancing the beauty and value of plant material through education, preservation, recreation, and research. The goal of the development proposal is to provide facilities to carry out the mission of the organization. Phase 1 will replace an existing storage barn with a modular building. This is to serve as temporary offices for horticultural and maintenance personnel. It will improve operations by allowing full-time year-round staff presence to manage and maintain the facilities and hopefully expand the hours of operation and to generate more revenue for this nonprofit organization, as well as to try to reduce vandalism that has occurred from time to time. The new building is shown on L2 of the plan. It will be located in the same location that the existing storage barn is located. This should result in minimal disruption of the forested area, but but it will require a portion of the garden beds that already exist to be displaced, which will be relocated and replanted and reconfigured. The time frame for Phase 1 is to break ground in the fall and to complete Phase 1 prior to the garden opening in spring of 2012. The property is served by an on-site well. It's under the jurisdiction of the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. The well will need to be reapproved as it is going to provide consumption, not just limited to non-consumption of the water, so it has to be reapproved by DEC. There are 4 new parking spaces that are proposed. Staff did note that there is a required minimum 4-foot separation distance between the parking spaces and the building, and recommends that either the site plan to be amended to provide that 4-foot separation distance. In addition, if there is not to be a curb, there do need to be wheel stops so that cars don't overhang the walkway to the proposed new building. Phase 2 is a planned visitor and education center, and this has a longer time frame of approximately 10 years. Possibly it could be started earlier than that, but it does have a longer time frame. This also will provide education and community functions, visitor amenities, and administration functions as well. And the location of the center is intended to maximize views of the garden to the south and exposure to the sun. The structure is elongated along the east-west orientation to maximize solar access. There will be a berm on the north side to reduce the consumption of energy. And also to merge the building with the surrounding area. The structures are being planned and designed to fit the natural environment that the beautiful environment that does exist there. There also, there will be minimal glass on the north side of the building as well to conserve on energy use. And now the master plan discusses existing conditions and the overall goal of the master plan, and the plan is to guide garden development so that future gardens and support facilities meet the Anchorage Botanical Garden mission while preserving the garden's natural setting. And the master plan does identify several categories of improvements that are intended to carry out the mission of the private garden. Well, it's a public garden, but privately owned. The plan discusses the management zones, buffer zone, riverine, ridge, and core area. And the core area is the primary facility area and will consist of the visitor center and various planned gardens. Page 8 notes that buildings will be designed to be sensitive to the environment, long-lived, sustainable, low maintenance, and substantially in support of the Botanical Gardens mission. In review of both the concept plans and the master plan, the staff who wrote the case did recommend approval, subject to 6 conditions that are found on page 5 of the packet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. O'Brien. I appreciate your report. And, on your recommendations, I'm new on the commission. I find it somewhat ironic that we're taking a look and kind of passing judgment on a plan that's produced by a botanical garden. But on your first 2 recommendations, are those, those are on almost all site plans. Can you just give me maybe a 60-second soundbite on the purpose for those 2 conditions? I
listened to a previous design commission meeting to find find the answer when that same question was asked, and the response was that that has been a standard that was established for the last 10 years, and so they do appear to be standard conditions that are placed on site plans, concept site plans, landscape plans, site plans.
Do you know the rationale? I mean, that's okay. I can take that offline. I'll check maybe with the planners this week. I'll give a call or something. Is that acceptable, I guess? Or does anybody know the answer?
This is an unusual case. You know, typically we're approving landscape plans for public buildings where we really want hardy nursery-grown plants that will survive to be planted. This is a little different. It's the botanical garden. I mean, the whole purpose is to do something new and different, and yeah, so I'm not sure it applies here. But it's nice to have things that aren't normal, unusual. So, Mr. Doherty.
Yeah, I was just, there's lots of really nice renderings of Phase 2 in the Visitor Center, but Phase 1, which I think we're really focused on tonight, it just talks about a modular building, no renderings, nothing. What is a modular building? Is it what I think it is?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Doherty, it's a prefabricated building.
Does it have wheels underneath it?
No. But as to the details of the design of that building, I would have to defer to somebody from the Botanical Gardens if they're available to answer that question.
We might be. My name is Greg Romack.
Yeah, Mr. Romack, if you can just wait a minute and we'll finish our questions with staff, and then we'll bring you up for additional questions, or to have a presentation and then answer some questions. So, thank you.
So I'll
Mr.
let
Doherty?
the petitioner answer that when the time comes.
Do you have additional questions of staff?
No, that was it.
Yeah. Does the board have any additional questions of staff? I had one question. Is we really have two basic things in front of us tonight: the master plan and then the Phase 1, and we have the 6 conditions. And I'm not sure all of these maybe apply to each issue. Are there conditions here that apply to the master plan? And then are there conditions that really just apply to the site plan? Because I was intending to ask for 2 separate motions on those 2 issues and then condition them appropriately.
Mr. Chair, I believe that they're asking, my understanding of the write-up of this is there are a request for the concept approval for Phase 1 and concept approval for Phase 2. Condition number 3 appears to apply to Phase 1, and condition number 4 and 5 also apply to Phase 1. There seems to be one condition that applies to Phase 2, and that's condition number 6, requesting that the Botanical Garden Center return to the UDC for concept approval if the design appreciably changes from that submitted for review. I assumed when I was reading this that 1 and 2 were generic. That would apply to basically Phases 1 and 2, but I don't see any condition for the master plan, specific to the master plan.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might add that I was reading through the master plan today, and it seemed like it was a 10-year time frame, and that they were anticipating that as progress is made on the improvements to the botanical garden, that they were anticipating they may have to come forward again with updates to the master plan in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions of staff? Apparently not. Will the applicant please come forward, state your name for the record, and you have 10 minutes to make a presentation.
There are 2 of us, but that's okay. My name is Aisha Gilbert. I'm president of the board of the Alaska Botanical Garden.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
I'm president of the board of the Alaska Botanical Garden, and we're delighted to be here today with this 3 projects in front of you for concept approval and site plan approval. As the Muni said, we lease land, PL1 land from the city. We have a 55-year lease with the city that started in 2003. So we have approximately 47 years to go on that lease. Of 80 acres, we have an MOU on 30 acres that is both marsh and riparian, which is not going to be developed. As you can see from the proposal in front of you, we have 3 pieces that we're bringing in front of you. The master plan for concept approval, Phase 1 and Phase 2. And that's what we can answer any questions you have. We've reviewed the municipality's comments. We don't seem to have any problem with them as we move forward to coming back in front of the UDC and building permits. Some of these things will be dealt with. Some of the questions that came up earlier, Greg Romack can answer about Phase 1.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of the applicant? Mr. Doherty?
Yeah, could you describe the nature of the modular building?
It sort of reminds me of a job office.
Could you state your name for the record?
My name is Greg Romack. We have a limited budget there. We're trying to get work center on site. Our first thought was that the thing that we could afford was a modular building, what I think of as a job office on a construction site. I don't believe that that's what we're really going to see there. We have looked at our budget closely, and I think we'll see a small, more permanent structure, more in keeping with something that looks pretty good out there. So that's where we're really headed. But to us, it's kind of it's just a budget item. But if I had to make a call, I think it would be a permanent structure.
I guess as a follow-up to that question, typically when we're provided a site plan for approval, as you saw with the previous case, we get some elevations of the buildings that are planned. We have some great elevations for Phase 2, but for Phase 1 we have this big blank, and that makes me a little nervous as to what we're getting and how that fits in with the area and what exactly we're approving. And Job Shack was not one of the things I envisioned when I was looking at this, and so I guess that's my concern. And do you have any response to that?
Well, when we first started this, we're working off of a grant from the state of Alaska. We have $375,000 to put a facility on site. We originally thought we could get there with a modular unit. We've since hired a complete design team, Barnes Architecture, BBFM, HCA for the M&E, and we think we're going to have, I'm confident that we will have a small structure there that's permanent in nature.
Okay.
And that's, we would all like that, but our first goal is to be on site, so
all right.
I don't think you'll be looking at a job trailer.
Thanks. Mr. Dinwiddie.
Hi, Greg. What is what's your best guess between Phase 1 and Phase 2 timeline? It looks like a pretty good sum of money to raise.
Yeah, we've been accepted by the Rasmussens and the 4 Acres to come up with that design and to go through the whole fundraising process. We're thinking, it's hard to say, but I guess we're thinking 5 years. We think 10's a little out there for us. So.
But it's dependent on fundraising. So.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We think it's a good thing that we're in that process, but there's no sure thing.
Right.
And as a follow-up, it's the 14th of September, and you get approval tonight, how fast, you want to start this fall with some of this stuff? You're pretty confident you guys' schedule is going to at least get your, because the building should be pretty simple, but your landscaping and such, we're burning daylight on that issue. And
what we've done is we've put ourselves in position with our contractor to have an early spring start. We basically have the pad cleared. We're ready to start first thing in the spring. We have, if everything goes our way, we have what we call a gala on June 21st next year. We would plan to have the building complete by then.
Anything else, Mr. Dinwiddie?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Pratt?
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. I really enjoyed going through the material. I'll tell you, I haven't been out to the Botanical Garden for, probably 5 years, and I really enjoyed going through your master plan. To kind of spurred my wife and I to think about going out there maybe in the next week or two, just to see what's going on. But I'm wondering if you've read the staff report and the conditions, and if you have any reservations about the conditions. I'm thinking especially about the first two in terms of telling you what type of things you can plant. If you want to move a tree from here to there, you can't because it's got to be nursery grown, things like that, or if that's not a concern of yours.
I don't think anything to do with, quote, the landscaping is a concern of ours. I mean, we got 70 or 80 acres there of plant material, and we're looking to do something unique and interesting. We're going to have to put a septic field in. We're talking about what we could grow on top of it. I think if we have any concerns about the conditions, it would probably be related to the parking. We're not sure that we're talking to traffic engineering. We're talking to the Benny Benson School about a shared parking agreement. In our heart of hearts, we're not really sure we want to tear up the front entry to put 4 parking places for such a small facility when we're not increasing staff or doing anything like that. So we're trying to kind of work our way through that, but we're not there yet. So that's our biggest, I think, concern if you just closed the door and asked us what we thought.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. And again, just for clarification, Ms. O'Brien, this is a concept approval of the site plan, so we will be seeing the final coming back to us at a future date. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, that is my understanding, except they are asking for a final approval of the master plan.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Dinwiddie?
I guess I could speak to Mr. Pratt's question. Everything in the Botanical Gardens is nursery grown. Every single plant in there. According to ANSI just tells you what size you have to transplant, and it basically gives you guidelines of how to do it, and they're all master gardeners there, so I don't think that's a problem. And the definition of nursery grown, it just has to be under a controlled environment for 2 years in the state of Alaska, and those are fairly simple things basically it says you're just not going out in the woods and digging it up and transplanting it. So,
well, that's what I was thinking, is if they had trees blow down or something, if they just wanted to go out in the native forest and just transplant some seedlings, I guess they couldn't do that, but that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? Any other questions? Apparently not. Thank you.
Yep.
With that, it's not a public hearing, so I won't be opening it up for testimony, so the matter rests with the board. May I have a positive motion? Mr. Dinwiddie?
I'd be making the motion that we approve the petition for their Phase 1 with the recommendations that staff has made. It seems fitting that the Botanical Gardens, for this Phase 1's pretty simple. I think we should give them the nod and trust that they're going to landscape it the way that we would like to see it and associate. So I'd recommend that we motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Dinwiddie. Just as a clarification, were you going to include Phase 2 in your motion, or were you going to do that separately? And then we will also need I was hoping to do the site plan, the concept site plan approvals separately from the master plan approval. I would like a separate motion for that. But did you want to include Phase 2 in that, or was your intention to make a separate motion?
Are we being asked my understanding is we're just being asked to approve Phase 1 right now.
The request was a Phase 1 and Phase 2 concept site plan approval. And concept site plan, or concept landscape plan, was what the request is for.
I'll amend my motion to do Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dinwiddie. And there's a second by Mr. Gasek. Would you speak to the motion for the concept site plan approvals, please?
As I stated in the motion, that I think that the petitioners got it right on for what we expect in meeting Title 21 and 2020. I think they've included everything, in particular Phase 2. They've gone above and beyond what our minimal requirements are, and I would urge our support.
Thank you, Mr. Dinwiddie. Mr. Gasek, do you have any comments to add?
Yeah, I'll be supporting the motion too. Obviously, the visual attractiveness of the landscape will be great, being it's the botanical garden. And it also meets the requirements of Anchorage 2020, specifically that it's going to maintain healthy and mature trees in the city. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Are there additional board comments? Mr. Doherty?
Yeah, I would also support the motion. I think that what's in the packet, specifically with regard to Phase 2, the measures of sustainability and the design proposal that they've shown, it seems to be consistent with, again, with Policy 50 and with good design standards. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Are there any other board comments? Is there objection to the motion? Seeing none, that is approved. Thank you for coming in, and thank you for all your hard work. Excuse me. Oh, yes, sorry, the final site plan. Yeah, can we have a motion for the final site plan approval? Final master plan approval, I'm sorry. Waiting for a motion. Mr. Doherty.
I move to approve the revised master plan for the Alaska Botanical Gardens.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. We have a second. Mr. Dinwiddie, would you like to speak to your motion, please, Mr. Doherty?
I do believe the master plan takes what's there and builds on it with some great value-added features that I think are consistent, well, as we've mentioned in the previous motions. And I don't see anything inconsistent with the goals of 2020 in developing this master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Mr. Dinwiddie, do you have any additional comments?
On the master plan, I agree with Mr. Doherty, and I'll be supporting it. I like the additions of the extra parking, the bus turnaround, and the addition of the green roof. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Are there additional board comments on the final master plan approval? Seeing none, is there any objection to the master plan approval? Seeing none, that is approved. Thanks for keeping me on task. And that takes us through the regular agenda. We have no public hearings tonight, no appearance requests. Under reports, the only chair report I have is I checked with the mayor's office to see where the status of our last and final appointment was, and I understood there was a candidate put forward, but I'm not sure where her application sits, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. It was actually a landscape architect, which we could use on this board. So hopefully that comes through. I will check on that and see where that's going. And Ms. O'Brien, do you have any reports for us tonight?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other board member comments? We have a new board member tonight. Welcome. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. Basically, I'm a horticulturist.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm a horticulturist. I've been in the horticultural business for over 30 years, I hate to admit. Worked as planning and maintenance for Providence Hospital many years at the head of UAA, and I've had my own perennial nursery for the last, I think, about 13 years. So plants are my thing.
Okay. Well, you're at the right place. Well, thanks. I think your expertise is a great addition to the board, and welcome aboard. And are there any other items? Can we get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Gasek, Mr. Dinwiddie, and we're out of here. Thank you. So are these all still ready for signing?